Tim Anderson is the director at the Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies and joins us now live out of Damascus. Tim, welcome. What did you make of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's return to the Arab League? He called it a historic opportunity for the bloc.
Well, it certainly is a historic moment, and I think that on the one hand, from the Syrian point of view, it's important to reopen that relationship with the Arab world because, after all, the Syrian government is very committed to pan-Arabism and joint Arab action in the region. And it also breaks the blockade, effectively, that the US has been imposing on Syria and much of the region. On the other hand, there must be mixed feelings because the Arab League is still full of states which have collaborated very closely in the US wars against the region. So there may be some limits as to how far this new cooperation will go.
So Damascus wants the Arab League to address the crises without foreign interference, Tim. If that was to be implemented, how much of a blow would that be to the US hegemony in the region?
Well, it's very important, and you can see precisely by the fact that it's not just that there is the shift in relation to Syria, but the fact that the Saudis themselves, a key agent of US and British imperialism for a century, are seem to be acting independently and without the permission of the US, and that's a great blow to the US capacity and instruments in this region, that the Saudis seem to be acting independently and have brokered their own relationship with Iran and have come closer to China and so on. That's a very important move in itself.
Right. How much instability has foreign interference, in particular Washington, the Pentagon, how much has that brought to the region?
Well, it's enormous. It's massive. There's a whole series of wars, more than half a dozen wars, which they call the New Middle East Wars, attempting to reshape the region and block out its major rivals, China and Russia, and also try and diminish the power of Iran in the region. So those, unfortunately, as I said, a number of those Arab states have collaborated in this. The Saudis, of course, Qatar hosting that huge US air base, Bahrain hosting a huge naval air base, Jordan helping train these sectarian Takfiri terrorists and sending them into Syria. So there's been a lot of collaboration in the region, and I'm not sure that that sort of baggage will disappear that easily. But nevertheless, I think most of the Arab states now want to take advantage of this opportunity and re-establish their influence in other ways, given that the war on Syria has failed.
You know, Tim, pardon me, during Syria's suspension from the Arab League, we heard from many members of the Arab League that it's time, they were advocating for Syria's return, saying that it was time for Syria to return to its rightful place in the Arab world. How much of a role can Damascus play in West Asia?
Well, the role of Syria is quite central in relation to the resistance countries opposing the colonization of Palestine, for example. We've got some other, I should mention, there's some other important honourable allies in the League, such as Algeria, which has always played a very positive role in the region and in the Arab world. So Syria, of course, is quite central, though, to that axis of resistance, supporting the Palestinian struggle, and that's of course central to the destabilization and also, on the other hand, the potential future of the region. There has to be justice in Palestine for the region to be really stable and prosperous.
Indeed, and Algeria never cut ties with Syria. Just finally, Tim, I don't know if you had the chance to visit a Palestinian refugee camp, the Yarmouk refugee camp in Damascus, on the outskirts of Damascus, I should say. It's the Syrian government turned this refugee camp for the Palestinians into something like a modern city. Before Daesh came and other terrorist groups leveled it, razed it to the ground. How much does that signal to you the support, the Syrian government's support for the Palestinians and its solidarity with the Palestinians?
Well, there's a very solid relationship between Syria and the Palestinian people. As you say, many thousands of Palestinian refugees have been housed in Syria, in Yarmouk and other places. Unfortunately, Yarmouk is a huge ruin these days, and most of the people living there have moved to other parts of southern Damascus, like Jaramana and Sita Zainab, for example. But that relationship is a rock-solid one, and the Palestinian people themselves, many of the resistance groups, have expressed their own solidarity for the Syrian Jolan, for example, which is a part of southern Syria that's occupied by the Israelis. So that relationship is rock-solid. It hasn't moved, and of course it's been a source of the aggravation against Syria. The US and its agents in the region have always wanted Syria to cut its ties with the Palestinian struggle, but Syria's refused to do that.
Tim, thanks a lot. Tim Anderson there, the director at the Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies, joining us live out of Damascus.